six-lettered word, but the emotions and warmth attached to it are incomparable. A mother is someone who gives her everything to a child even before the child enters the world, and she continues to do it selflessly throughout her life. But sometimes, in the rush of our lives, we forget to appreciate the one love that is going to stand by us through all ups and downs of our life. We take her service and care for granted and don't realize it till we are bereaved of it. Today, a similar situation is going to be presented in front of you by the students of class 11 in the form of a play. Presenting before you Mother's Day, written by J.B. Priestley, an adaptation.
Starting with the introduction of our actors and their respective characters, we first have I.S. Nanya playing Mrs. Annie Pearson. She is a pleasant but worried-looking woman in her 40s. Mrs. Fitzgerald, played by Shishti Rohatgi, is a woman with a strong and sinister personality. Doris Pearson, played by Nihalika Grover, is the daughter of Mrs. Pearson, who would be pleasant enough, who is a pretty girl in her 20s, who would be pleasant enough if she had not been spoiled. Cyril Pearson is being played by Divjot Singh Uppal. He is the son of Mrs. Pearson and the masculine counterpart of Doris because of how much he has been spoiled. He spends most of his time outside his house. George Pearson, the husband of Mrs. Pearson, is played by Aditya Nath. He is a man aged 50, fundamentally decent but solemn, self-important and formless. The scene starts with Mrs. Pearson and Mrs. Fitzgerald having a conversation. Mrs. Fitzgerald is telling Mrs. Pearson her fortune.
And that's all I can tell you, Mrs. Pearson. Could be a good fortune, could be a bad one. All depends on you now. Make up your mind.
Yes, I'm much obliged, Mrs. Fitzgerald. It's wonderful having a real fortune teller next room. Did you learn that out east too?
I did. 12 years I had of it with my old man rising to be lieutenant quartermaster. But will you make up your mind now, Mrs. Pearson? Put your foot down, once and for all, and be the mistress of your own house.
That's easier said than done, Mrs. Fitzgerald. Besides, I'm so fond of them, even if they're so thoughtless and selfish. They don't mean to be.
But it would be better for them if they learn to treat you properly.
Yes, I suppose it would in a way.
Do you think it does them good when you run around them all day asking for their orders as if you were their servant?
I keep dropping a hint.
Hint? It's more than hints your family needs, Mrs. Pearson.
I suppose it is, but I do hate any unpleasantness. Besides, it's so hard to know where to start. Oh, good gracious, look at the time. Nothing ready and they'll be home any minute. Probably all in a hurry to go out again.
Let them look after themselves for once. This is where your foot goes down. Start now.
Mrs. Fitzgerald, I know you mean well. In fact, I agree with you, but I just can't, and it's no use you trying to make me. If I really promise you that I'd have it out with them, then I know I won't be able to keep my promise.
Then let me do it.
But that wouldn't do at all, Mrs. Fitzgerald. It couldn't be anybody else. They'd resent it at once.
You haven't got the idea.
Oh, I'm sorry, but I thought you asked me to let you do it.
I did, but not as me, as you.
But that's impossible.
How do you know I ever tried it?
No, of course not.
Well, I have to have. Now come here and keep quiet a minute.
Mrs. Fitzgerald, I don't know. Is it right?
This is your only chance. Now give me your hands and relax.
After the spell has been spoken, both women, still holding hands, go lax as if the life was out of them. Then both come to life.
Now, Mrs. Fitzgerald takes the personality of Mrs. Pearson and vice versa. In the clear words, Mrs. Pearson is now Mrs. Fitzgerald and Mrs. Fitzgerald is now Mrs. Pearson.
Oh, it happened.
Of course it is. Very neat. Didn't know I had it in me.
But what am I going to do? George and the children can't see me like this.
They aren't going to. They'll have me to deal with. Only that they won't know it.
But I don't possibly want to be somebody else.
Relax, Mrs. Fitzgerald. You'll probably have more fun as me than you ever did as you.
But what if we can't change back? It would be terrible.
Steady, Mrs. Fitzgerald. want.
Well, do it now.
Not likely. I'm gonna deal with your family first. That's the idea, isn't it?
I don't know. Is it alright?
It's going to be wonderful, Mrs. Fitzgerald. Go into my house for a bit. It's empty. And pop back in to see how we're doing. You ought to enjoy it. Now off you go before some of them come.
Mom, you'll have to iron my yellow silk. I must wear it tonight. What are you doing?
What do you think I'm doing? Whitewashing the ceiling?
But you're drinking.
That's right, dear. No law against it, is there?
But I thought you didn't drink.
Well, then you thought wrong.
Are we having tea in the kitchen?
Have it wherever you like, dear.
Do you mean it isn't ready?
Yours isn't. I've had all I want. Might go out later to get a square meal at the Clarendon.
Who might?
I might. Who do you think?
Mom, what's the matter with you?
Don't be silly.
It's not me that's being silly. And I must say, I've been working hard all day and you couldn't even bother to get my tea ready. Did you hear what I said about my yellow silk?
No, don't you like it now? I never did.
Of course I like it and I'm going to wear it tonight. So want it iron.
Want it ironed? What do you think it's going to do? Iron itself?
No, you're going to do it for me. You always do.
Well, no I don't. And do not talk rubbish to me about working hard. I have a good idea how much you do, Doris Pearson. I put twice the hours and get no wages nor thanks for it. Why do you need your yellow silk? Where are you going?
Out with Charlie Spence.
Why?
Why? Why shouldn't I go out with Charlie Spence? If he asks me, I don't want to. Any objections?
Can't you find anybody better? I wouldn't be seen dead with Charlie Spence, buck teeth and half-witted.
He isn't.
When I was your age, I'd have found somebody better to go out with or given myself up as a bad job.
Oh, shut up!
Hello, Mom. Tea ready?
No,
Why not?
couldn't bother.
Feeling off color or something?
Never felt better in my life.
What's the idea then, Mom?
Just a change.
Well, snap out of it, man. Make tea for me. Haven't too much time, you know.
I've plenty of time.
Yes, but I haven't. Got a busy night tonight. Well, did you put my things out?
Can't remember, but I doubt it.
Now look, when I asked you this morning, you promised me. You said you will look through them in case there was any mending. So
Well, now-
What?
Well, now I've decided I don't like mending.
That's a nice way to talk. What would happen if we all talk like that?
You all do talk like that. If there's something at home you don't want to do, you don't do it. If it's something at work, you get the union to bar it. Now, the only thing that's happened is that I joined the movement.
I don't get this. What's going on with you?
Changes. You look terrible. I wouldn't wear that face even for Charlie Spence.
Oh, shut up about Charlie Spence. And anyhow, I'm not ready yet. Just dressing. And if I do look terrible tonight, it's your fault. You made me cry.
Why? What did she do?
Never you mind.
Is there any stout left? Can't remember.
Bottle or two, I think. But you don't need stout now.
I do.
What for?
To drink, you clot.
Has she been like that with you too?
Yes, no tea ready. Couldn't care less.
Ben, I'm glad it's both of us. I thought I'd done something wrong.
So did I, but it's her, of course.
She was drinking and playing cards when I came in. I couldn't believe my eyes.
I asked her if she was feeling off color and she said she wasn't.
Ben, she's suddenly all different. And that's what made me cry. It wasn't what she said, but the way she said it and the way she looked.
Then she looked just the same to me.
She doesn't to me. Do you think she could have hit her or something, and got, what is it?
Do you mean she's balmy or something?
No, you fat head. Concussion. She might have.
Well, it sounds far-fetched.
Well, she's far-fetched, if you ask me.
Now, then, what is it?
If she's going to be like this when Dad comes home.
I'm staying in for that.
Me too.
You two are talking about being grown-ups. Why don't you both try to be your age for once?
Can't we laugh now?
Of course you can. If it's funny, go on then. Make me laugh. I could do with it.
You know, you never understand our jokes, ma'am.
Oh, please, Doris. I was yawning at your jokes before you were even born.
What's making you talk like this? What have we done?
Nothing, but come in, ask for something, then go out, and come back in when there's nowhere else to go.
Look, if you won't get my tea ready, then I'll find something to eat myself.
Go on, help yourself.
It's not fair, Mum. I have been working all day.
Same here.
8-hour day.
Yes, 8 hours a day, and don't forget it.
Well, I've done my 8 hours.
That's different.
Of course it is.
It was. Now it isn't. 40 hours a week, Phil. All now. Just watch it at the weekend when I take my 2 days off.
What? Must grab something to eat.
Mom? 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 You don't mean you're not going to do anything on Saturdays and Sundays?
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I might make a bed or two and do a little bit of cooking, which means, of course, that I'll have to be asked very nicely and handed for and generally made a fuss of. But if any of you 40-hour weekers expect to be waited hand-on Saturday and Sunday, then you're in for a nasty disappointment. Might go out for the weekend, perhaps.
Go out for the weekend?
Yes, why not? I could do with it.
But where would you go? Who would you go with?
Now that's my business. You don't ask me where you should go or who you should go with, do you?
That's different.
The only difference is that I'm a lot older and better able to look after myself. So it's you who should do the asking.
Oh, this is awful.
Now stop it. You're not a baby. If you're old enough to go out with Charlie Spence, then you're old enough to take care of yourself. Now stop it.
Hello, what's this? Can't be anything to cry about.
You'll see.
Did she say you will see?
Yes,
What did she mean?
better ask her.
Stout?
Yes,
What are you drinking stout for?
because I fancy it, son.
At this time of the day?
Yes, what's wrong with it at this time of the day?
Nothing, I suppose, Annie, but I've never seen you do it before.
Well, that ought to be a nice change for you, George.
Yes, and I don't like it. It doesn't look right.
Well, it must be some time that you were surprised at me.
I don't like surprises. You should know that by this time. By the way, I forgot to tell you this morning. I wouldn't want any tea. Special snookers match at the club tonight. So no tea.
That's all right. There isn't any.
What do you mean? You didn't get any tea ready for me?
Yes, and a good thing too, as it's turned out.
That's all very well. But suppose I did wanted some.
My goodness, listen to the man. Annoyed at me that I don't get a tea ready that he doesn't even want. Ever tried that at the club?
Tried what at the club?
Going up to the bar and telling them you don't want a glass of beer, but you're annoyed that they haven't already poured it out for you. They'd laugh at you even more than they do now.
Laugh at me? They don't laugh at me.
Of course they do. You're one of their standing jokes. Famous. They call you Pompey Ompy Pearson because you're so pompous and slow.
Never. Here, Cyril, you have been with me once or twice to the club. They don't call me Pompey Ompy Pearson or laugh at me. Do they? Go on, tell me. Do they?
Well, yes, Dad. I'm afraid to do.
Well, I will be damned.
Now, you shouldn't have told him that, Mom. That's not fair. You have hurt his feelings and mine too.
Sometimes it does people good to get their feelings hurt. Perhaps if your father didn't go to that club so often, they'd stop laughing at him.
I doubt it.
Possibly you do. But what I doubt is whether your opinion's worth having. What do you know? Nothing. You spend too much time and good money on dirt tracks, greyhound races, and ice shows.
What if I do? I have got to enjoy myself somehow, haven't I?
Well, I wouldn't mind so much if you were actually enjoying yourself. But are you? And where is it getting you?
Might be for me. I'll see. It's that silly old bag from next door, Mrs. Fitzgerald. You don't want her here right now, do you?
Certainly I do. Ask her in and do not call her a silly old bag either. She's a very nice woman with a lot more sense than you'll ever have. Come in, Mrs. Fitzgerald, come in.
I just wondered if everything's alright.
No, it isn't.
Of course it is. You be quiet
Why should I be quiet?
because I tell you to, you silly young pekin.
Oh, no, surely.
Mrs. Fitzgerald, now I'll manage my family in my own way, please.
Yes, but Cyril.
Mr. Cyril Pearson, to you, Mrs. Fitzgerald, please mind it.
Oh dear, what's happening?
Nothing, just putting them in their own places, knowing what you ought to have done long since.
Is George home?
Yes, and I've been telling him what they think of him at the club.
Well, they think a lot of him, don't they?
No, they don't, and now he knows it.
Oh, no, you shouldn't have said that.
Mrs. Fitzgerald, mark my words, they'll be eating out of your hand soon.
But I don't think I want them eating out of my hand.
Well, whatever it is that you want, they'll be doing it.
Just looked in for a minute. Mrs. Fitzgerald.
Yes, I suppose so, George.
George.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, what does it matter? Your name's George, isn't it? Who do you think you are, King of England?
Yes, it isn't bad enough for her calling me George. First you're Pompey Pearson, then Naughty. Now poor Doris is crying her eyes out upstairs. Yes, you listened it right. Crying her eyes out upstairs.
Oh dear, I ought to have known.
Why you should have known that, Mrs. Fitzgerald. Look, we are at our 6s and 7s, so perhaps you will excuse us.
I won't excuse you, George Pearson. Next time a friend or neighbor comes home, say something nice. Good evening or how do you do? And don't just march in and sit down. It's bad manners.
No, it's alright.
No, it isn't alright. We'll have some decent manners in this house, or I'll know why. Well,
Well, what?
they're waiting for you at the club, wanting to have a good laugh. Go on then, don't disappoint them.
Go on, don't mind me. Now make me look silly in front of your neighbors also. Firstly Naughty, then your Pompey Pearson. Now poor Doris is crying her eyes out upstairs. 6s and 7s. What has happened to you, Annie Pearson? What has happened to you? Have you got balmy or what?
If you shout at me again like that, George Pearson, I'll slap your big fat silly face.
Oh no, Mrs. Fitzgerald.
Now,
Either I am off or you two are. Mrs. Fitzgerald, why are you stopping yourself when you are not doing anything? Tell her to stop. Then there will be some sense in it. I think so. You both must have gone diddly or something.
say that again, George.
Alright.
Hello, Doris.
Hello, Mrs. Fitzgerald.
I thought you were going up to Charlie Spence tonight.
What's that to do with you?
Stop that. I wouldn't have a daughter of mine talking to anybody like that. Now, answer her or go back up again.
Don't look at me. I give it up. I just give it up.
Well, answer her.
I was going out with Charlie Spence tonight, but now I've called it off.
Oh, what a pity, dear. Why have you?
Because, if you must know, my mother's been making me feel miserable and saying he's got buck teeth and is half-witted.
Oh, now you shouldn't have said that.
Nonsense, Mrs. Fitzgerald. Now, I'll manage my own family and you manage yours, please.
Kicking her off now, isn't it, Annie?
They're waiting for you at the club, George. Go on. Don't disappoint them.
Alright, that's enough. Quite enough. Now listen to you. I want to have a private little talk with Mrs. Mrs. Pearson. So it'd be better for you to excuse us.
I am glad somebody can. Cause I can't. Let's go, Doris.
Mrs. Fitzgerald, we must change that now. We really must.
Why?
Because I can see they're all miserable and I can't bear any more of it.
A bit more of the same would do them good.
No, I can't stand any more of it.
Well, if you insist,
Yes, I really do.
quiet now. Relax.
After the spell has been spoken, both women, still holding hands, collapse, as if the light was out of them. Then both come to life.
Now, Mrs. Pearson has taken back her personality and is now again Mrs. Pearson and vice versa. In clear words, Mrs. Pearson is now back being Mrs. Pearson, and Mrs. Fitzgerald is now back to being Mrs. Fitzgerald.
Well, I enjoyed that.
I didn't.
You ought to have. Now listen, don't go soft on them again, or else it'll all be wasted.
I'll try not to, Mrs. Fitzgerald.
Listen, you admitted yourself that you were spoiling them.
Well, I'm sure they do better now, Mrs. Fitzgerald. But I don't know how I'm going to explain.
Don't you dare start any explanation or apologizing for all you've done and be back to where you were.
Well, that's easy for you to say, Mrs. Fitzgerald. After all, they aren't your husband and children.
Listen, dear, I'm warning you. Just give them a tone of voice from time to time, or maybe just a look to suggest you can be tough with them if you want to.
Well, I'll try to, Mrs. Fitzgerald.
Anyhow, we can test it.
How?
What is it that you like to do? Stop at home for once?
Yes, perhaps, and I would like if they gave me a hand with supper too.
And what's something that you like to do, whether they do or not?
Well, I'd like a nice game of rummy, but I hardly ever get one, except at Christmas.
Well, that's good then. And remember, don't be firm, or else you'll be back to where you were. Hoy, come in now.
Yes, Mother. Well, seeing that you don't want to go out, I'll tell you what I thought we could do.
Remember,
No objections, I hope. Well, I thought we could have a nice game of rummy, and afterwards you children could go make supper while I have a talk with your father.
Yes, that's fine. But what about you two?
That's alright.
Well,
What is it? Speak up.
Oh, I think it would be lovely.
Goodbye, Mrs. Fitzgerald. Come again soon.
good night, you all. Have a nice time.
I am sure we all have clearly understood the message that our mothers just want a respect and some quality time. And we should do that in spite of us being busy in our lives.
Before we end, we would like to thank you all for being a wonderful audience. A special thanks to the cast, narrators, creative team, stage managers, and a special thanks to our director for giving us an opportunity to showcase the talent.
I must say, children, this was a spectacular performance, and I think they deserve huge round of applause. And like everybody, I enjoyed it truly, and what I was fascinated with, that none of you ever forgot your part, and you played it brilliantly well. So thank you, children. Thank you for giving us.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And to the children, this is the wonderful team who has worked with me backstage. There's a creative team who took care of the boards. There were stage managers who took care of the stage setting. There were photographers